So Avado are a adult professional learning business. So we develop learning programs which are designed to drive behavioural change across organisations. So that's a pretty wide canvas. So we major on 3 or 4 themes, in particular digital marketing, data and agility, all themes super important in businesses before the pandemic and almost certainly been accelerated or emphasised through the pandemic. And those learning programs are a mix of apprenticeships. So we're one of the largest apprenticeship providers in the UK. Online workshops, boot camps, modules, and obviously since the pandemic, all of those are now delivered virtually. So we've existed in various guises for about 10 years or so. We've been ventured by a business called Blenheim Chalcott, which you may be familiar with. They are still our majority shareholder. And we recently moved to Scaleup, which is an innovation hub on Imperial College's White City campus. And we've also got some regional offices in APAC, in Singapore and Hong Kong, and then in the rest of the UK in Birmingham. And just to kind of help scale us as a business, we're about 400 people across those 2 regions. And we work with a mix of individual learners. So these would be individual people wishing to invest in their own development by doing professional qualifications in marketing, L&D, HR qualifications. But we also work with about 300 enterprise B2B clients. And we do that across a number of different sectors, but we have a particular and deliberate focus on financial services, FMCG, pharmaceuticals and the wider life sciences sector, tech and telco. So I'm part of the executive team. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer. I joined in February last year, which was quite interesting. I joked for most of last year that you shouldn't be sent home by your new employer 3 weeks into your new job, but I took solace in the fact that there was another 65 million people were sent home at the same time. So I'm responsible in my role for new business development, account management of our existing clients, so through our client success team, marketing, and our product strategy. Our business is broken up roughly a third. So a third of our business and what we do pertains to those individual learners. So people of all ages wishing to do professional qualifications in a number of specific domains. And then 2/3 of it is working with organisations, so enterprise organisations in varying different sectors. And then probably half of that, so a third in total, is delivering apprenticeship programs for those clients. So approximately a third of what we do is professional qualifications, a third is apprenticeships, and a third are non-apprenticeship corporate training programs for those organisations. In terms of our geographical spread, we have 2 offices. So we have a principal office in London and a principal office in Singapore. The Singapore office gives us some reach and some local presence in an area of the world where that's probably more greatly valued. But we have a number of international clients. So of those top probably 300 clients, I'd probably say that maybe over 100 of those have got some form of international presence. And whilst we have only got 2 offices, one in London and one in Singapore, the nature of our learning programs and the virtual nature of our learning programs mean that we can deliver programs across the globe. So, we're currently working with a very large pharmaceutical business, which has been in the news recently, a number of tier 1 banks, a number of telcos, where the learning programs that we deliver them from our London office, but they actually cover most geographical regions in the world and would typically be spread over tens, if not small hundreds of countries. We have a particular skill around designing learning programs, which is a skill. So we have a number of learning designers that are in-house in Avado, and we fuse that with content, some of which we self-develop and some of which we develop with partner organisations, and we put that curated content on our own personal owned learning platform. So those partners, depending on the domain we're talking about, but we have long-standing relationships with the likes of Google, with Tableau, which is the data visualization tool that's part of Salesforce's business, and then a relationship with CIPD in the UK, and also some fledgling relationships with some other organisations such as Salesforce and Asana, the kind of agility tool, online agility tool. So, we'll typically curate programs through a combination of self-developed content, but then using some partner content from some specific organisations that are highly relevant and highly recognised in the domains that we're looking to build those learning experiences in. We've probably got no less customers, and we've probably got no less learners. Our sales are probably similar year on year, actually, which we've actually seen as quite a win, given the headwinds that we've experienced over the last 12 to 15 months or so. My experience is driving profitable growth agendas. So when I reflect on the last 12 months or so, I think we're very proud as an organisation because we have managed to grow quite considerable our profitability, which may seem slightly odd in one of the most difficult periods over the last maybe 100 years or so. I think it's probably a function of two things. There has been a huge explosion and wakening up and realisation around skills and about capabilities that individuals and organisations need to build. So, we've had a good number of inbound requests and market drivers that have supported us. But I also think as well that, sometimes, and it's not probably the first time, when you find an organisation that is under some form of strain or potentially under some form of strain, it forces you to make some more deliberate decisions. And I think one of the challenges around the learning industry is that the good thing about it is it's relevant for everybody, whether it's any individual learner or any organisation. The bad thing about it is it's relevant for every learner and it's relevant for every organisation. And whilst we're a substantial player in the space, we're not a big multinational, and therefore we have to make some deliberate, and we have had to make some deliberate decisions about what parts of the market we are going to focus on. So, and the parts of the market that we need to focus on are where we believe we can have the greatest impact for our clients. And I think if you look back for a business that's been ventured over 10 years, it's probably not atypical that we found ourselves in a position where we do quite a lot of things reasonably well. And I think if we look to what it's forced us to do in the last 12 months or 15 months or so, and what's absolutely fundamental to us growing over the next 3 years, is actually not trying to be everything to everybody, but be something that's really important to a kind of shorter number of people. And it's a huge market, the learning market. And therefore, you don't actually need to provide a solution to every individual or every organization's problems, as long as you're providing a really high quality solution to a subset of those. So we found a combination of those external factors and then some deliberate decisions that we've made internally has been hugely helpful in terms of keeping us on the right rails and keeping us rails which actually year on year have been more profitable. We now have a much richer talent pool to pick from. So when you have a base office, be that in Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds, London, then I think there is whether deliberately or not, you start to attract a talent pool that's probably an hour's commute from there. And depending on how quick your train line is or how quick you can cycle, that can still be a fair sized distance. But what it probably doesn't do is allow you to recruit people in different countries to do jobs which would have historically been UK based jobs or in much further afield. So during the pandemic, I think there is a challenge in trying to recruit and assess and then onboard and induct people remotely. But the upside of that is that we've been able to fish in a much wider pool, and I think we've probably ended up having some talent join the business. So of that kind of 30, 40 or people that have probably joined us over the last 18 months or so, or 15 months or so, I think we've probably ended up with a higher quality talent than we may have done were it not for the pandemic, because we're being able to fish in a wider pool. So we're ostensibly a London-based business in the main, and we've recruited people from Madrid to Glasgow, and I just can't pre-pandemic I'm not sure we would have done that. I think we would have probably been in a bit more of a constrained field. I think the tricky bit is less around the recruiting, but it's more about the onboarding. So I joined the business as I said 3 weeks before the pandemic started in a relatively senior role in a business that I'd never really had much experience with, and in an industry that I was relatively new to. So trying to assimilate all those parts remotely and in what was not a distress but a kind of an intense period was tricky. So I do have a kind of protective eye on the new people that we bring into the business. That are we doing enough to onboard them in the culture, and are we doing enough for them to pick up the information that allows them to be successful in their role over the coming weeks, months, and years or so. And I think that's the bit that's tricky, and that's the bit that, as we're now moving back to an office, and we have a shiny new space in Scaleup space here in West London. I think we're starting to think about, not how do we get people back together to sit in rows of desks like they might have done historically, because people have become, much more akin to doing that at home, drinking their own coffee and, sitting in comfy clothes. But I think what we're trying to figure out is what we use the space for. And I can't help but feeling that using the space as a learning tool and a collaboration tool is probably where we're going to end up, because that's the kind of stuff that's more difficult, I think, in the current variant of the world, is more difficult to do remotely. That we needed a different space. We probably needed a smaller space. So, if it was 100 bags of sugar, it's probably now 40. So it was probably between 40 and 50% of the size that it probably was before. I think we needed to kind of see the office not just as this physical building, but an outreach into people's homes. So we ended up taking quite a lot of counsel from folks across the business in terms of what support people would need from a logistical or from a monetary perspective for people to set up their own home offices. So, people could more, as we return back to the office, could more seamlessly drift between their home working space, and the physical office working space that I'm sitting in today. And I think if you look at that physical office working space, we were quite keen, and the feedback that we got from the team is people didn't want us to replicate rows of desks, but they wanted it as a flexible space that could accommodate a variety of different needs. So, in the building that I'm sitting in now, we have a video and kind of voiceover suite. We've got a number of specially designed collaboration zones whereby, whether it's a marketing team or whether it's a product development team, or even perhaps a finance team that are trying to collaborate to get our month end done, there are places where there are parts of the office that are set up such that it encourages that collaboration. So it's round big screens with whiteboards or smart boards that allows people to do it. But there's also, some comfortable breakout areas and some kind of social areas. I think one of the things that we're very mindful of is for certainly the younger part of the population that work for Avado, it's probably quite a lonely experience perhaps working from home. They may not have a partner, they may not have any kids, they may live alone. So when we look at the office, it has to be fit for a lot of purposes, and there are some hot desks if people want to come and work in the way that they maybe did historically. But actually, it was important to us to have all these other areas, and as importantly, it was some areas where people could relax and kind of socialise. Because I think one of the things that we tell our clients is that people learn best and work best when they're having fun. So again, back to your shoemaker's shoes analogy, if we create an office that's too rigid and isn't fun to be in and isn't interesting and doesn't allow people to kind of want to come in, well, we'll probably end up with a workforce or a kind of population of staff that are not as motivated, not as productive, and much like our Beyond Skills research recently, is not going to be as profitable. So I think it's early days. We've only been formally back for a few weeks or so, and I think there's still a few builders around moving and painting and positioning things. But we're hopeful that we've got a best of kind of both worlds, where it allows some people some quiet space to work, but it's also an area that allows some kind of group work and some social work as well. Middle of last year, we founded an interesting digital skills program called Fast Futures. So it was a brainchild of a number of people at Avado and Blenheim Chalcott. And the idea was to create a work readiness with a strong slant towards digital and data for young people. So those people between the age of 18 and 23, 24 in the UK, who may have found themselves doing something different to what they expected last year. So they probably thought they were going on an apprenticeship or starting university or perhaps a job or a work placement. And many of those opportunities had been taken away from them. So we wanted to put a program together that, and of the people that were more likely to be disproportionately affected would be those from a kind of lower socioeconomic or a more underrepresented background. So we were keen, as somebody who is an exponent in designing high quality learning programs at scale, we were keen to put a program into the market, which we did in September last year. So it's free to the learner. We've had around 10,000 applications to that program, of which we've probably accepted we've now started 3,000 students on that program. And the reason why I bring it up is that the reason why we could do that free to the learner was because of the kind sponsorship from large UK organisations such as Barclays, AstraZeneca, BT and others. So the reason I raise it is because it's a great example about when you get providers, so experts in their field like us, when you get them working very closely with large organisations such as AstraZeneca and BT, when you get them to then work alongside key people in government and then entrepreneurial people such as Blenheim Chalcott and some of the businesses they've ventured, you can actually do some really interesting stuff and you can do it really quickly. And for us to go from a standing start from May, June last year to launching one of the largest digital skills program in the UK by September, and probably by the end of this year, so 18 months from the program, having best part of 5,000 young people through that program, many of which have gone on to get jobs, find themselves in opportunities that they wouldn't have before. When you ask me what more can external people do, I think there's a greater need for collaboration between those parties, to see whether we can continue to do, whether it's Fast Futures or whether it's a whole bunch of other initiatives which benefit Avado, but probably more importantly benefit the UK as we try and make ourselves the kind of single best place for us to be in Europe or globally. We're very keen to make sure that we had a good national geographical spread. I think sometimes these programs can have a bias towards London or the southeast. So we have been very deliberate in our marketing outreach to the young people or the potential learners, by having some regional outreach. So on the program, we have we have a disproportionate amount of people from black and ethnic minority backgrounds, or from lower socioeconomic groups, or from with people with designated disabilities. So we were quite keen for it to be as expansive a program as possible. Now that required us to make sure that we assessed people fairly. So assessing people based on their academic qualifications is not necessarily always a good read of how capable or how ambitious they are. So we've worked with a number of organisations that could almost take people's academic qualifications to one side. Many of those people from those backgrounds may have fallen outside of mainstream schooling, and we've tried to make it as fair and transparent process as we can so that we get the best candidates on the programme. And I think we're pretty comfortable that we've done that, because our completion rate is in the kind of high 70s, 80s, and for those of us that work in the learning industry, that's pretty good going. The bit that's come out of it that I think has been a surprise to the employers is this diversity angle, and how actually they have been exposed to people from probably a wider degree of backgrounds than they would have ordinarily recruited. So if I look at what organisations I think need to do to be successful, it's to make sure that they have a diverse set of people coming into those organisations, or are progressing through those organisations. And I'm not just specifically talking about diverse from a kind of ethnicity or a kind of race or colour perspective. I'm talking about diversity of thought. And I think what's starting to land, not only with employers through Fast Futures, but in some of our wider discussions with employers, is that if you can build a diverse workforce that can answer a problem from a load of different perspectives, you've got a much better chance of being able to fix that problem, and fix any future problems. The programme is designed to make young people more confident and more able and more successful in applying for jobs. We've got some great stats about how people have gone on to do jobs that they didn't think they were going to go and do, or they would have never had opportunities to do. So yeah, it's been great. It's been really interesting.